Hello and welcome to the Cloud Therapist channel. I'm Richard Simon. This is going to be a data state of play panel discussion. I have a couple of great guests for you today, so we're going to go through some topics and really discuss everything. By the way, we are at the Big Data show in London. All the crowds behind us, you can probably hear, is everybody else going downstairs and having a conversation with all the vendors and everything and all the theatres going on here. So let me do a intro first. So Mustafa, would you mind just doing a quick intro for yourself and about EnterpriseDB as well?
No problem at all. My name is Mo Zakaria. They call me Mo for short, and I work for EnterpriseDB. So not a lot of people have heard of us because basically we do a lot of work on the community level of Postgres. EDB is the single largest supplier of code to the community. So when we say we are Postgres, it is not a marketing gimmick. We do more than Amazon, IBM, Microsoft, and Google combined. And in terms of my personal background, I've been working with databases from the 1990s till today. You're talking Oracle and SQL Server, but I've also served as a technical sales engineer at MongoDB and have been working with machine learning solutions before they were cool in the 1990s.
Fantastic, excellent. Okay, so on to Paul.
Hi, anybody who's seen Richard's Cloud State of Play will probably know me, but for those of you who don't, my name's Paul Bevan. I'm Research Director for IT Infrastructure at Bloor Research, and I'm at the Big Data show because I'm suddenly finding that infrastructure is being heavily influenced by what's going on in data. And actually it's probably the biggest driver for new infrastructure that there is around. So that's why I'm here. It'll be an interesting conversation.
Absolutely. So we have three topics we're going to be focusing on. So first topic is data migration to the cloud. So how do you actually migrate your data to the cloud? What does that entail? What do you need to do to actually prepare for that? And some of the motivations really behind that as well. And then we'll look at the latest database space. What's actually happening in the database space? We'll talk to Mustafa in regards to that, and we'll get some more details on that. And then maybe just kind of focus it down a little bit on vector databases. That seems to be the latest thing that's kind of happening, certainly in the AI and generative AI space. So maybe we'll do a little bit of a visit towards that. Okay, so let's go on to the first topic, which is data migration to the cloud. So Paul, what are you kind of hearing about this space when it comes to migrating data? What are customers kind of talking about? What are you seeing in terms of challenges as well?
Well, I think the biggest challenge is, do you start with data or do you start with the apps? A lot of people have been migrating apps and the data's been a sort of afterthought in terms of migration. And I think that's led to a number of problems. And we're seeing a move now that says, I need to get my data architecture right, and then start to think what data needs to reside in the cloud and why, and then the apps follow after that. So I think there's almost like a 180-degree turn that says you're not really looking now at applications being migrated to the cloud. You've really got to think around the data, because if you don't, you're going to end up with far more silos of data than you've already got.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the kind of one of the challenges that really customers have, is how do they really sort of not just migrate the data, but how do they deal with that data and so on. I think that's really important.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, it's difficult in this sort of fast-moving world to say to people, actually stop, think about it, get your data architecture right, get your strategy right around your data, then you'll make better decisions around what do I migrate and why am I migrating and is it going to perform, than jumping too fast. And if we've been guilty of anything in the last few years of cloud, it's been that we've tended to jump too fast into the cloud and not think about it enough.
Absolutely. So Mo, what are some of the things that kind of customers are talking to you about when it comes to migrating their data? Again, maybe a similar question kind of in terms of their challenges and how is EDB actually helping them with that?
Great question. So a lot of the questions we get from customers is, can we run as a service? Now that I'm on the cloud, I don't want to manage all of the finicky components myself. I want to be able to have as little touch on the tech as possible. So can we run as a service is generally the first question. Another strange idiosyncrasy that's coming up lately is people who want to run on hybrid. they're either looking to get off the cloud or not to relinquish entirely their on-prem side of things. That is becoming an increasing thing that we're seeing more and more. And of course, there's the question of Kubernetes. That a lot of customers, if they're not interested in running as a service, they are interested in running on Kubernetes, whether it's EKS, AKS, or what have you. And a lot of people are coming us to that. In terms of the migration itself, again, it depends on the different customers. The migration process is the same from the EDB standpoint. You're moving from point A to point B, same kinds of challenges. But the key component that we keep getting asked is about scalability. Is that, okay, I want to move very large quantities of data onto AWS or Azure. How can you guys help us scale? So again, it's a mixed bag. It depends on the use case. Some use cases work very well with EDB, others not so much, that are more sort of data warehouse oriented. But those are generally the kinds of challenges that we see and the type of value that we can give.
Right, and I have a kind of the way that I sort of discuss it with some of my customers is there is kind of maybe stages to the migration in terms of how you do it, because we can't all be, migrate everything overnight and it's perfect, right? We can't achieve that. So there's kind of stages that I look at, and when it comes to the migration. So how is kind of EDB helping customers with that? Do you guys kind of do the assessments? Do you look at sort of alternatives? Maybe if the customer's in a Oracle database or SQL Server or a previous Postgres or something like that, how do you guys kind of help with that and give them the advice that they need to actually migrate to the right platform?
No, that's a great question, Richard. So if you're going from Postgres to Postgres, it's pretty straightforward from our perspective. We have the tooling and the services needed and the manpower if that is required. If you're migrating from a different database, whether it's Oracle, DB2, or SQL Server, Postgres at EDB, we do have tooling that facilitates moving off of Oracle specifically. We've developed a proprietary layer on top of our enterprise offering that enables a very rapid translation from Oracle to Postgres. But in terms of process, we also have partnerships and process to move things like DB2 and Microsoft SQL Server onto Postgres. So we offer software, support, and service to facilitate the process, including things like the assessment and how much time it will take and what have you.
Right, fantastic. So Paul, we've talked a little bit before about sort of the motivation and the strategy for migration, and we joked about it earlier when we were having a tea at the canteen there. We talked about, are customers looking at it from a data point of view, from a database point of view, from an apps point of view, from a platform point of view, your favorite word for the show, or from a politics kind of point of view?
And my answer is the same as it was in the canteen, which is a little bit of everything.
Bit of everything.
But the reality is, there's a sort of, and we alluded to it just a minute ago, is that it was apps focused to start with. Very much, I've got it.
So when we first started moving into the cloud, right? Yeah. That's what we looked at.
We looked at apps, and it was quite often it was new apps. It wasn't, we weren't taking the existing back-end services across. It was developing new apps, and obviously, over time, more and more of those back-end systems are being repurposed, refactored, whatever, and certainly if not wholesale, then bits of them moving across. But the reality is that you do end up with data all over the place, so I think
the data sprawl, right?
Data sprawl. So I think we are beginning to see more and more. Depending on the industry, some industries are ahead of others. You just said telcos and media have had to deal with this quite a lot. The banks have got different issues because they've got sort of data sovereignty and data privacy and security issues they've got to worry about. But I think that's just leading everybody to think, hold on a minute, I need to take a data-centric approach to migration rather than an apps approach. But at the moment, it's a bit of everything, including politics.
Right, okay, yeah, so that's definitely in there as well. Okay, so let's move on to kind of the latest in the database space. So Mo, what's EDB seeing at the moment? What are you guys kind of noticing in the market in terms of database sort of technologies or maybe standards that are coming out, some of the challenges again that you're seeing in that space?
It's a very interesting time. That at the same, on one hand, the fundamentals of database technology haven't changed. We're still working old school computer science, memory, disk, and compute, but the demands are ever increasing. And if you go back to the 2010s and like between 2010 and 2020, NoSQL was all the rage, taking into account the fact the horizontal scaling and etc. Now a lot of that has fallen out of favor. Obviously, it's not 100%. There's still a lot of interest in that, but a lot of that has fallen out of favor, and people are increasingly coming back onto more relational model. But at the same time, the level of demand for scalability and the types of features that came with NoSQL are still expected. So it's interesting where on one hand, some customers are expecting a high degree of specialization. They want a data warehouse, they want a lake house, etc., or they want a database, but the database companies are trying to expand and encompass more of those use cases within their platform itself. So it's a very unusual time to be alive. And then of course there's Kubernetes. A lot, again, you go back to the 2010s when Kubernetes was still in its infancy. Sure, some people tried to run their databases and stateful workloads on that platform, unsuccessfully with the risks, but now it's become almost a standard that yes, we want to be able to deploy in Kubernetes and we expect it to work properly. So now there is catering to that dimension as well. Then of course there's no avoiding the whole AI boom, that now that your data is on the database, there is a very intuitive connection in people's minds between machine learning and databases, even though the reality might be a little bit different. If you speak to machine learning people, their view of databases is very different from database people on machine learning. But there is some convergence with the technology now, and it's being expressed increasingly in terms of things like RAG and vector databases. So it's a strange time.
Right, yeah, I think certainly lots of things happening, and it's kind of coming in from different sides as well,
yes.
right? That's what we're probably noticing. So, in terms of EDB, are you guys still sort of driving with things like Big Animal and stuff like that? What's kind of the latest specifically in your solutions?
Big Animal is still very much there, but it's not a flagship of what we're doing. I mean, it's a database as a service. You need to maintain a presence in the space. But a lot of what we're doing nowadays in terms of our development is to start incorporating machine learning and analytics onto the platform. EDB isn't the machine learning company, so we're not the guys you would come to optimize my gradient descent or like what type of neural network I should be using. We are just going to leverage what models you bring or ready-made models. But if your data is already sitting on Postgres, with very small extensions and small changes, you can get to do things like semantic search, fuzzy searching, that kind of thing, with just some minor querying on the database itself. So it's not going to solve all the problems, but it will definitely make people's lives easier.
Right, fantastic. So, Paul, you and I spoke about data fabric. What is a data fabric?
Well, I was going to sort of jump in just back there, because I think one of the big challenges is that with all the different data sources and all the different databases out there, the pressure has been, don't go and create another data lake or another data warehouse. Use the data you've got once, please. And therefore, how do I manage all that federated data? And you get this sort of not conflict's probably the wrong word, but the difference between a sort of fabric, which is a centralized control over that sort of the way in which you manage data across multiple sources and use it once, whereas the data fabric is very much a sort of distributed type system, much more attuned towards regions and sort of functionality rather than a sort of centralized control. But fundamentally what you're looking at is, how do I ensure that I can use data once as I go into an analytics pipeline, for example, rather than having to offload everything into a secondary data store and then use it, with all the challenges that comes in terms of keeping it current, etc. So I think a lot of where Fabric and Mesh have come from is alongside the idea of a federated database.
Right, okay. So one of the topics obviously that we need to touch on is vector databases, because that obviously is the all the rage when it comes to AI at the moment. So Mo, give us a sort of a quick breakdown on a vector database. What is a vector database?
A vector database. So let's take away all the bells and whistles. Like, what is a vector? A vector is really just a long string of real numbers. Now, oh my God, that's pretty stupid. How can I possibly use that? Well, again, this is a computer. A computer is not aware of context. A computer is not aware of things that a regular human being would understand. So how do I translate an image of a chihuahua into something that is useful to a computer? You would feed that image through a model, and the output of that model is a string of digits that says whether or not this is a chihuahua or a muffin. And the reason I'm using that is because that's the training use case that we have. It's like, is this image a chihuahua or a muffin? So once you've passed it through the model and you have your list of chihuahuas and muffins expressed in digits, you can throw an image at it or you can throw a query at it, and it'll figure out, no, this is a chihuahua, no, this is a muffin, because you've translated the data into something that the database and the computer can understand. Because at the end of the day, when you're working with machine learning, people tend to elevate what it is. It's really just taking things that you and I understand implicitly and turning it into a string of numbers that relate to weights in a neural network. And that's all a vector really is at the end of the day. What can you use it for? I mean, it's like mostly things like AI use cases and geospatial, but outside of that, you're going to have to get very fine-grained into what it can be used for, because you are correct. Can I use it for a lot of different things? Well, it depends on the modeling and AI you're using, but outside of that, you're not going to get very much.
Right, so it's kind of, you're trying to not just classify, but kind of class the, classification is kind of maybe one thing, but having like a class of systems in that sort of, that particular vector, so to speak, that kind of defines all dogs, for example, or canines.
Yes.
That would be kind of the class that you're looking for.
Classification is a use case. So if your model is a classifier, like is this a dog or a muffin, is this a Merc or a Beamer, that kind of thing, that's a use case, and that the model would translate that into some numerate way that's encoded in a vector. You could have something more specific, like I could feed, for instance, all of the speeches said by US presidents from 1968 till today, and then run a query, get me all the times Barack Obama spoke about gun control.
Right, yeah.
And that would be expressed in a large vector. It's not going to be small, obviously, yes, but you can actually do that kind of semantic search when you have your data encoded and embedded in vectors. So that's the type of potential you can get out of it.
Right, fantastic. Okay, and we said the kind of AI is the main use case, really. Are you seeing a lot of customers kind of talking to you about that and wanting to do that? Because obviously the likes of Gartner and some of the other sort of research organizations have kind of said, 2024 has kind of been the year of experimentation, the year of running pilots and proof of concepts for AI. So lots of organizations, and we're seeing that in some of the surveys and reports as well, whether you talk to CIOs or ML ops engineers or whatever, that's essentially what everybody's kind of doing for this year. So are you seeing a lot of take up on that? Is EDB kind of being asked to engage on those types of POCs and things like that?
So, full honesty, we're relatively new to the space. So aside from the vector database and some of the tooling that goes around it, we're fairly new, so we're pushing it out. We're not getting a lot of feedback, but it's interesting the reaction that we're getting every time we mention it. It's like, oh, I didn't know you could do that, and suddenly more people are asking questions. And whether or not you're a skeptic of AI or you're a proponent, it is out there, and people will come up with that demand. So it's better to be prepared than rather than just wait for it to become an established trend and be a laggard. So.
Fantastic. Okay, cool. So Paul, very briefly, is kind of this topic sort of taking up a lot? Are you seeing a lot of people talking about him? Some of the I know you go to a lot of exec dinners and you host a lot of exec dinners. In fact, you're hosting one tonight. So what's the latest sort of conversations around that?
I mean, you're not hearing at that level, you're not hearing much about vector database.
No, I'm sure not, yeah.
You're hearing an awful lot about AI.
AI generally, and generative AI.
And Gen AI seems to have sort of taken off. It's the first time I think I've heard business executives expressing any interest in learning more about AI. Because previously it was a geeky, algorithms, and I don't really want to be involved in it, you go do your thing. But suddenly Gen AI and the fact that their kids at home are using ChatGPT, suddenly is getting them.
That's probably a good motivator, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like, oh my God, what are they up to? Yeah, absolutely. There is definitely a bigger awareness of its potential. I'm not sure at the exact level how far they have understood the work that needs to be done to turn it from a neat tool into a real, enterprise-wide capability, I think. There's a bit to go yet.
Right, okay, yeah. And obviously, I mean, we could go on talking about various other topics. There's loads of other stuff like what will we be talking about? Data observability. I think we'll maybe save that for another video at some point. We'll certainly go into a little bit more detail on that. Okay, so yeah, appreciate you guys for all your insights. Really been useful. Thank you, Paul, very much. Thank you, Mo, as well. Thanks for coming on. Links to both of these guys where you can find them, and you know, all the sort of stuff that they get up to and so on will be in the description of the video. Please do let us know what you think about all of this stuff. What's the kind of, maybe some of the things that you guys are working on at the moment? Are you working on any sort of vector databases or AI projects, Gen AI projects, you know, in your enterprises as well? That would be quite cool. So drop us a description or a comment in the on the video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.